Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our local section annual treasurer orientation webinar. My name is Megan Barillo, and I'll be on the webinar to help with any technical issues. Our speakers today are William Cassidy, CWEA's current state board treasurer, along with our incoming treasurer, Sean Neskis. And we have CWEA's chief operating officer, Rainu Pal. During the webinar, we will pause to take some questions. So if you would like to speak, please raise the hand feature and I will unmute your microphone. Or you can type your question into the Q&A box on your Zoom control bar. And if you have any technical issues, type your issue into the chat box. And just a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted to our YouTube channel and on our Leader Resources page at leaders.cwea.org. Okay, now and I'll turn it over to you, William.
Okay, the next, the webinar's overview, what we're going to cover is basically your local section financial policies and procedures, your role as treasurer for the local section, reporting requirements for the local sections, the budget and reporting templates that CWA will have for you to work with, available support. Of course, that includes basically CWA staff and board members, and then some updates to the auditor's request. Each year, CWA is audited because it's non-for-profit and of a size that requires annual third-party auditing. Next. The treasurer is an important role, both at the state level and the local level. It's very critical. Your charter or your constitution for your local section should kind of outline some of your duties. Your local section may also took it upon itself to kind of expand on that and write it as part of explaining each parties or board members' functions and responsibilities on the local level. But it also is an important role in that you're part of the planning because you are help with the budget. That's part of your responsibilities. And the execution of that budget, how your local board uses those funds in meeting the goals or the intentions of the nonprofit, the mission of the nonprofit. It's also an important role because you're the key player in communicating the financial status and ongoings of the local sections to CWA, because as our parent, really we're one identity. And so the local sections are just as important in tracking things and keeping accounting of things, such that we keep track of our responsibilities. So the treasurer, as far as financially and correspondence, is just as important in leading the local section as the president or the chairman of the local section. Here we have basically the main output from our audit for this past year, for fiscal year 1920. There's two steps depending on what they're finding. As you can see here, there were significant deficiencies or how they categorize them. But depending on that size and status, there are two steps. One is a step where they can issue to CWA's board a memorandum saying, here are our findings. Here's some things you should take a look at. And that's basically what they address here. Later on, I believe Renew will get into the details of what those deficiencies are, but generally it's basically communication or accounting of both the local sections revenues and expenditures. It's the records, it's the paperwork that they saw some deficiencies in, and Renew will get into more detail concerning those and the steps that'll be taken to address those concerns. Next step. The biggest guide for what your purpose is outside of your constitution for the local section or any write-up that maybe previous officers have written as far as the responsibilities is our financial local section financial policy. Now it's on our website, and like in most cases, unless you play with the website a bit, it can be a bit confusing. We have displayed where it's located at, but actually if you go to CWA's website and log in, you would go to I think about, and up under about you have choices concerning leadership or leader resources, and up under that tab or that pull down would be CWA policies, which if you click, it would bring you to this page where all our policies are listed. So there's some steps to go through to find it on our website, and that's the best approach. If you just try typing in searching policies, it will not get you to here. So it's up under about, leadership resources, CWA policies is the pull down way of getting to this page, and then clicking on the CWA policies tab there. The policy is kind of an expanded definition of what your responsibilities are. It actually covers all the responsibilities from CWA level down to the local section. It's kind of a standard operating procedure for those in the industry out in the field. You'll see you have procedures written out that go step by step what needs to be done. This policy kind of goes through that, and I would strongly recommend that everybody pull that up, read it. I think it's 10 or 12 pages. It steps through the roles of the board of directors, CWAs, my role as treasurer, various responsibilities of staff and board members, and then goes into also great detail the financial responsibilities of the local section board in which you're a member of, and particularly looked at as far as the financial responsibilities as the treasurer for the local section. So to fully understand everything that you got to do, all the documentation and reporting, please go to that. It's kind of a guide. You may still have some questions afterwards, but that's the best source to outline your steps, your responsibilities, and what needs to be done. The reason for the policy, it reduces the risk to the volunteers in CWA in that it gives a written procedure, responsibilities, understanding that's consistent versus if it was all given by verbal and it can go secondhand. So it's always clear when everything is written down and precise. So you can look at it as your guidebook. And so having that written policy, that standard procedure, reduce the risk to everybody involved. By having everything written down that you can always go back to, it improves your ability to meet your job and meet your responsibility. Again, it's kind of an instruction manual, a guide. It gives you one source to go. Of course, you got backup by reaching to the board, CWA board, or CWA staff on hand if you have further questions beyond what the book or the guide gives you. It also defines and would give a consistent reporting from everybody. It's kind of configuring such that all your reports are consistent and the same, because in the audit, they look at the whole, and obviously it would be consistent and easier for everybody to analyze and assure compliance with requirements if it was a common set approach to handling all this. And that's what this guide gives. It gives 17 local sections, a guide such that everybody reports in the same fashion, same way, same information, and to ensure everybody meets the reporting or IRS requirements. It ensures we have a guideline to make sure we conform to the IRS and California regulations for a nonprofit organization. There are special requirements for us as compared to a private corporation. And then, of course, because of all the guidelines on documentation and reporting, it prepares CWA for the audit, and that it's organized and consistent from one section to the other. And so it makes their job and our job much easier to respond to any inquiries. Next. Because of the audit, there's going to be some updates to the policy. There are basically two ones. If you read the policy, there's been questions on what section members can do or cannot do, and what board members can do or cannot do that involves payments. So we're going to clear that up and define, make it clear as far as what disclosures must be made with related party activities. And then the other issue that we'll be addressing with changes in the policy is to clarify and make it more clear of what's required for reimbursements or payments to contract services that you incur, what must be submitted, and also the timing of the submit. I think Renee will go into more details on what the audit found, but generally it's been documentation, both with expenditures and deposits, and then also the timing of receiving those documentation, both at the local level and at the state level. And then also the third thing, donations. You'll notice, and when we get further along, you'll see in one of the templates, there is a category donations. And it's been raised, or questions have been concerned about who or what other organizations we could assist in. And so we're going to clarify that to ensure it's clearly understood. Everything we do must be in accordance with our mission, the mission of CWA. Next. Here's our mission statement. It's in the financial policy, the FP-104, and we print it elsewhere. Our mission, SCWA, as our mission as a whole organization and the local section's mission, is to increase the effectiveness of California's water environment professionals through education, certification, and promotion of sound policies to benefit society concerning the water environment. So you can see we got really 3 tasks: educate, certify, and promote for the benefit of the water environment. And everything we do must be in line with that mission. Here, financial reporting is important. As you can see there, for those of you who have been a treasurer already for a year or several years, and those of you who are new, CWA provides you a template for your reports and for your budget. It protects you as treasurer, and it gives you a standard format to help with building your local section's budget. It helps, of course, because everything is documented and planned out. It helps protect everybody involved, all the volunteers. Of course, in our self-interest as board members, it protects us and that everything is consistent. We know what you're planning. We have a standard reporting mechanism for you to use. So it's much easier for us to follow and address any concerns that may arise. It's required by the auditors as part of standard practice. And it's also required as part of our tax return file by CWA. And it's a standard approach, again, for our type of organization, a nonprofit. So this is a simple template guide that breaks down the revenue and the expense by rows and then categories along the top. There's flexibility built in, and by being consistent and standardizing everything, it's much easier for everybody to follow the rules and do what's required. And also for each party to review each other in comparing. And the last one here, any questions? I do see one chat. Oh, Megan, if you notice, for everybody, has the link in the chat, or can everybody see that? It's basically link leaders.cwa.org. We'll get you to that page where the FP-104 policy is stored on CWA's website. Do we have any questions at this time?
For those that came in a little late, if you do have a question, you can click the raise hand feature on your Zoom control bar, and I can unmute you if you have a question, or you can type your question into the Q&A box.
If we don't have any questions, I guess, Megan, we can move on.
Thank you, William. I'm going to go over the next few slides. This is Renu. And as William mentioned, there are going to be some updates to the Fiscal Policy 104, and they're mainly going to address some of the concerns that the auditors presented forward to the committee, the audit committee, and also the CWA board. But most and all, actually, I believe all of what is currently in the FOP, financial policy, is still going to remain in there. So I'm just going to go over a few of the most common and familiar items that are usually questioned or treasurers are not sure about. Bank accounts. Every local section has their own bank account, but it can only be one. It can be one bank account. Local sections do not have savings accounts or money market accounts or any other investment tools. It's a checking account. Online access is required for all of the bank accounts, and currently every single local section bank account has online access. It's important for a treasurer to review your account online regularly to see if there's any fraudulent activity, because if you don't, you'll only find out when it's too late. So just if you can, just make a habit of checking it once in a while in between getting statements. We do have debit cards linked to the different bank accounts. We try not to give out and try not to make a habit of using debit cards because they are linked to an individual. And every time there's a change of an individual, that debit card has to then be canceled and a new one has to be issued. And to protect more the volunteers and to be able to maintain all the right signatures, we try not to hand out debit cards, but when necessary, they are available. We also have merchant accounts available, and I believe most local sections have used their merchant account. Obviously, over the last year, there's been very little activity, but prior to that, I do believe that most local sections are using their merchant accounts. We do have an agreement, a blanket agreement that covers all of CWEA with a low fee for their merchant fees. So if you don't have a merchant account and would like to get a merchant account, please reach out to Chris Consuto, our staff accountant, and he can help you with that. Megan? So here are some of the other requirements. An AP check. If you're writing a check over $500, it does require 2 signatures. One of the things that we can do one of the ways that we can help, or you can make that work if you are not together very often, is via email. If the second signatory can email their authorization to the person who's actually signing the check, putting the wet signature on the check, and then when it's submitted to CWA, the treasurer would submit the email for the second signature showing an authorization. Justification. When you see a check request or when requesting a reimbursement or a payment, the justification, does it meet the CWA mission? That's a good way of looking at, do I need to incur this expense? Does it meet the CWA mission? Documents. A lot of receipts that you get are on the paper, which can kind of get fadey after a while. I think it's the carbon paper. It's a good practice to, as soon as you get a receipt that's for an expense that you know CWEA needs to refund you, make a photocopy of that receipt. And that way it'll last a lot longer and chances are it won't get lost. So even if you have to take a photograph with your camera, take the photograph with your camera before you lose the receipt or before it loses the ink on it. Validation. What the auditors and the IRS, what they want to see is that the expense is justified. So if we give out door prizes, or if we give out gifts, they want to make sure that one person didn't receive it, that it was uniform and it was fair. We don't do raffles. We give out prizes and it should be random and it should be fair and it should be equal to everybody. And that's why they ask for the list of receipts. And the same as in dinner expenses. They want to make sure that not just a few people are going out for an expensive meal. They want to make sure it's uniform, that everybody is equally treated. So make sure you keep the list of attendees for meals and recipients for any door prizes or gifts. Sometimes it's easier to remember to do things when you know why you're doing that. And in this slide, I'm going to try to explain why we have to do what we have to do. So we have a 503(1)(c)(3) status. That's what we have. And what that means to all of our governing agencies, which is the Internal Revenue, State of California, mainly, and then the Attorney General, they don't get any tax dollars from us. They don't get anything. So because they don't get anything, that's one reason they want to make sure that a nonprofit does everything they're supposed to do. And a nonprofit will lose their license faster than any other entity as far as the IRS is concerned. The other reason is we have a mission. We're a nonprofit, we're a charity. The way that the Attorney General sees us is we're the caregiver and the gatekeeper of all the membership dues we collect, of all the fees, of the TCP, of our certification program, of our education program. We have it. It's now our responsibility to make sure that that money is spent on the mission that entitled us to our nonprofit status. And as far as they're concerned, we are one organization. We are California Water Environment Association. We have that number, and every single expense out of any account that's under that number is scrutinized equally. So when a local section writes a check, it's looked at the same way as when headquarters writes a check, or when a committee writes a check. It's scrutinized equally. And there's two main reasons. One is they want to make sure that this organization is keeping to its mission and not misusing funds. And the other is they're not getting any tax dollars. So they would put an end to it faster than if they were obtaining tax dollars. Megan? So there's going to be some upcoming changes. William already talked about the first and the second with the related third party and the donations. And that really won't impact most of the local sections. And it's just a question of making a payment. What will impact you will be the other three a bit more. The way that we have been trying to incorporate the local section finances into the headquarter finances is by getting the monthly reports, and we allow 30 days and then another 30 days. And then sometimes we don't get it on time and it goes to 3 or 4 months. That was a red flag. So what the auditors want is it to change from cash accounting to accrual accounting. That means instead of waiting for when you write a check to a vendor or for a reimbursement, waiting until it clears your account and then waiting a month or 2 months to turn it into headquarters, they want it changed to immediately. So if you write a check, once you write it, you've already received your check request form from whoever is the requester, the backup documentation, you've written the check, you submit it to CWEA headquarters. And we're working on that. We're working on these changes with the CWA Board Ops Committee. And a lot of the members of the Ops Committee have been local section treasurers. So we're working hard with them to see what will work the best to not put too much burden on the volunteers of the local section versus, what the auditors are now requiring us to do. So we are working on that. We don't have it down, but we are working on it. The other item that will affect you and the reporting is the auditors believe that the CWA board should know what activities are happening on a more regular basis across California under its governance. Now remember, the CWA board is the ultimate authority for CWA and what it does, and it's takes on the full responsibility. So we will add in the monthly report a calendar of events. what was there a meeting, a dinner meeting, was there a training? It will basically be like a calendar of events. We'll create a template to make it easier. Again, we'll work with the ops committee, but it's something we'll incorporate in the package. And to be able to get it to the board faster will require that the local sections CC the liaison, the board, CWA board liaison on their financial reports. And that way, when the CWA board meets every quarter, they'll have all the information available to review, at least to view and review. And the third item they wanted to address was bank deposit reconciliations. For that, it's basically having two people, a person that makes the deposit, and the second person would be the local section president who would sign off on the deposit. And we'll get into that more as we put these changes into place. Megan? And then there's some other items. These items are already in the 403, so they're not changes. It's just a reminder. If you do sign a contract, it can only be within a 12-month contract. You can't sign multi-year contracts. If you have a list of assets, if you buy assets, just keep a list. After a while, they will depreciate and they'll be of no value, but we do need to keep a list of CWA assets and the location that they're at. It's a requirement. We would like to have at least 2 signatures and only 2 signatures on the different bank accounts, the local section bank accounts, mainly for 2 reasons. One, if someone is out sick or is on a vacation and a check needs to be signed, you have a backup. And we want to limit it to, again, for the work it takes when there's a change in a position or in the board. 1099 recipients, when you pay anyone, we usually say if it's 600 plus, that would trigger a 1099. So if you're paying an individual, not reimbursing, a payment like a training fee for a service such as training or for bartending, was doing something where it's for labor and not for end product, you should get a W-9 from them regardless of the amount you pay. Because if someone else uses them that's under the CWA umbrella and under the same tax ID, that could add up to 600 in a calendar year. So it's 600 in a calendar year, not per payment. So, and we'll explain this more in the fiscal policy. So regardless of the amount, if you pay for a service, not for a product, require a W-9 before they provide the service, so before the expense is incurred. Megan? Here's some budgeting guidance that we'd worked on with the Ops Committee last year. Mark Takamoto had worked on some things and the Ops Committee put some things together. And then with the auditors, we kind of put a little bit more in here. So soon, in the next couple of months, you will be working on your 21-22 budget. And I'm assuming, like we are at CWA headquarters, we're kind of hoping that everything will open and that we're kind of a little like maybe not. I'm hoping that, you guys too are hoping that everything will open with a little bit of maybe not. But at the same time, a little difference from us, we have overhead, you don't. So this is a great time to kind of look ahead and see what you could do next year. And a great way to start the budget, and with everything else now that they're requiring, is create a plan. So look at your 12 months. Make sure when you plan that all members are being treated equally. You want to invest back into the membership and towards CWA mission. So read the mission. And when you plan, read the mission and say, is this what we're doing? Prioritize your goals. It can be different. Some people believe in networking because that is promotion. That is good. More education, more support. So that's a lot that you can do. Work towards reducing your balances if you have high balances. And this year, a lot of activity didn't happen. Work towards at least 50% of your annual budget if you can. Now, be very careful here. So when we say work towards, there are a lot of good things that you can use your money for besides high door prizes, gift certificates, or free meals. That is something the auditors will frown upon. If we look, we have in the budget, we put it in last year, we have a line for opportunity, local section opportunity funds. And we put it in there so that we could bring equality to all of our members across California. So as a local section, depending on your geographic location, you could have as many as 1,700 members, or you could have 89 members, just purely depending on your geographic location. And then you translate that into dollars. So you have 1,700 times 12, or you have $89 times 12. It's a big difference. And for revamping websites, for a lot of other things, the smaller local sections, it's just too expensive for them. Think about local section opportunity funds to help some of the local sections that are in areas with fewer members in their area, with a less of a population in that area. That would be helpful. And then when you're spending, think of its purpose. Again, networking is very good. Having something fun to do and issuing door prizes is great. It brings in more people. Plan it through and have the dates, and they may not be the dates that actually happen, but there'd be tentative dates. And then as the year progresses, you can have something to look back at of when you planned it to happen, if it happened, and if it didn't, why didn't it happen? So it'll be something for you to reflect back on. Megan? So this is the reporting template. And I believe a lot of the people on the local section leaders on this call may be familiar with this, but I'm going to go through this for anyone that has not used this template before or that will be using it for the first time in a couple of months when they change over. The first thing on the template that you will be required to do or need to do will be to complete the budget for fiscal year 21-22. And that's what we just talked about. It's due back to CWA headquarters by April the 30th. It's really important for us to get those back because on the May meeting, the PPD meeting, the PPD committee reviews those budgets. And then at the June meeting, the CWA board approves those budgets or asks questions. So it's really important to get them in before April 30th so that we're not pushed behind. If you have any questions, William is available, Sean, myself, Chris. There are a lot of people you can reach out to. Okay. And then this is the working template. Each local section will be sent a complete monthly reporting template. The template is about 17 tabs. You'll see the tabs along the bottom. Each tab has a month. To start the template, you will start in the very first month, July 1st is when you will start using this template. And you will just follow exactly what it tells you to do. You'll enter in a dollar amount, your beginning checking balance right at the top. And then when you receive your bank statement from the bank, for every check that cleared the bank statement in July, on the July tab, you will enter that dollar amount under the program that it was meant for and in the row of the revenue or the expense. The deposits will go in the revenue and the expenses will go in the expense. And you will just follow that for every single month of the fiscal year. The template is password protected, so don't be afraid. You won't be able to screw up too many cells or anything like that. And if it doesn't work for you, if it does get, if there is a problem with it, please reach out to us. We are there to help you. Megan? And this again was just what I actually explained. So I explained this part a little too early. So you'd put the July amount in there, and the way to make sure that all of your deposits are in and all of your expenses are out, at the bottom, your ending balance on the template should match your bank statement. Okay, Megan? So we're creating some new check request forms, and then to align with it, a deposit report. Some of the in-house local sections have already seen the new check request forms, and these are still in the works. They're not finalized. We're still getting some input back from William and the ops committee to see if we can make them any easier to read. But with these check requests and deposit forms, it's much easier for us to identify the expenses and the revenue, because it relates directly to the form that you're filling on a monthly basis. So just a quick recap. You'll receive your template tomorrow. It's due back by April 30th, and that's for your budget. But you'll fill in the budget tab and you'll email back the entire template. Monthly responsibilities for a treasurer. It's to create a financial report that's detailed in Fiscal Policy 104. So, and with the financial reporting template we'll send you tomorrow, we'll include a copy, a PDF copy, and maybe even the link of the 104 policy, so it's easy for you. So when you look at that policy, it will tell you exactly what you need to return to us on a monthly basis. But there will be some additions made, but it will detail all of what's required in there. And then lastly, the bank statement reconciliation. It's so important to do a bank reconciliation, because if there are outstanding checks, the bank balance that you have is not your true balance. It has to account for every single check that has not cleared. Megan? And this is what's going to be new. And we haven't quite created a template for this part yet. So from the audit concern, we'll be creating a template that will be filled in. We'll ask you to fill in monthly, and it will have a category of the event, whether it was a dinner meeting, an educational event, networking. It will list the date. It'll have an attendee register, if there was a cost, and if there was a deposit. And it'll need to be signed by both the local section president or the vice president and the treasurer. And this is just a little bit more on the mobile readers that we have available. I think I mentioned that we do have merchant services. We have mobile readers that local sections can take to your dinner meetings or to your events. I don't think they exactly look like that, but we couldn't find the right image. But they work out great. We have a lot of local sections using them. And if you don't have one, please let us know that you need one. You can have more than one. If you have more than one event at the same time and you need two, you can get more than one. Megan? Okay, with that, I'll take any questions.
There are a couple of questions. Did the audit reveal findings for all sections, and is there a list of those findings to be reviewed by local leadership?
So the auditors, they had some findings. The findings range. So the way that it works is we have 17 local sections. They randomly selected between 5 and 7, and some were in-house, some were out. And then they do a test. They ask for receipts for expenses that cleared the checking accounts. They'll ask for deposits. And it didn't meet the standards. And they don't then list each and every one. They either pass or fail it, and they failed it. What they did do was give a verbal update to the audit committee to tell them about some of the findings, but in the actual management letter, they wrote what William displayed in the PowerPoint. That is what they wrote in the management letter to the governing board.
Okay, there's another question. Are we allowing electronic signatures? Meaning, can we use Bluebeam or Adobe to digitally sign documents?
On contracts that are not over a year, yes, I think so. If that's the question. Is that the question?
Valerie, can you, I was asking about checks.
No.
Are local treasurers being given checkbooks to pay expenses, or will checks still need to be requested?
So the local sections that are doing their own bookkeeping have their own checkbooks. The local sections that CWEA is doing bookkeeping for, those checkbooks are with CWEA.
Are we not allowed to turn in an invoice to the districts for payment?
To the districts.
You know what, that's a, Candace, I'm going to allow you to talk. Did you wanna, I'm gonna unmute you if you'd like to speak. See if she can unmute herself. There is another question while we're seeing if Candace can unmute her microphone.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay,
Hi,
I was
Candace.
just asking, like, you know, when we have the dinner meetings and stuff, we usually do most of the districts and the cities for the Central San Joaquin section, we invoice them. They just sign in and then I invoice them. That is not allowed anymore.
I'm sorry, Candace, I didn't quite understand the question. Can you?
Okay, we usually invoice the districts or the city, a lot of the different ones, like
Yes, I understand what you're saying. So you invoice them and then you collect, they pay on the invoices?
yes,
For your event. That's allowed.
That's still allowed. Okay, great, thanks.
A couple more questions. If local section banking is done by CWEA, do any of those items apply to them still, to the local sections?
So currently we are doing local section bookkeeping for 10 local sections, and it's working out pretty well. So the most significant difference is that, and we're going to talk about it actually in the next set of slides. Sean is going to go over us doing CWA doing the bookkeeping versus local sections doing their own bookkeeping. So I think that answer will be better questioned in the next set of slides instead of me going into detail now. But the answer is there is a slight difference, yes, or there is a big difference, yes.
Great. And then one more question, does 501c3 allow for funds diversification for partial reserves? And can funds be placed on money market accounts to grow revenue to local sections?
We do have funds that are set aside to grow reserve funds. And if the question is, can we open, and we can't open a separate account just for a particular local section's funds, because we will have too many different financial institutes. So that's why we kind of reduced it to one checking account. But at CWA headquarters, we do have a diverse reserve fund that we have for reserves. So what we encourage local sections to do with the money they receive is not to reserve it, but to put it back into the mission.
Great, that was all the questions for now.
Thank you.
Okay, well, you've heard a lot from William and a lot from Renew, and I'm going to follow this up on the bookkeeping side of it. As Renew had shared, there's 10 local sections currently using the bookkeeping support from CWA's main office. It takes some of the burden away from the local section treasurers from having to do a lot of this information, and it keeps us in compliance and eliminates some of the issues that could happen that was shared of lost receipts and reactions. And also there's there are check runs that'll be done. There's no specific date, but there are weekly checks that will be cut to reimburse the local sections when their paperwork is turned in. So there's 10 out of the 17, and so we're about 59% of those sections that are using CWA's offering of doing it for them. This is the report for responsibility of the treasurer. You can see in the 2 columns for the bookkeeping service that's provided by CWA staff, and then what it is or the task and without the bookkeeping. So the budget, the depositing of the receipts, the description of the revenue, listing attendees, things like that is part of the bookkeeping service that treasurers could take advantage of if you're interested in being part of the CWA support. Megan, thank you. So there's 3 ways to be part of this. The obvious one is opting in. If you talk about it amongst your board or your committee members of your section, and you're not doing it now, you can always opt in to do that. As if you're not part of it currently, of the support of CWA, there's and you're not, and it's not getting done quickly enough and on time. If you're 3 months late, then it's looked at, and then it's possibly moved into the bookkeeping support in-house, or if it's continue or ongoing lateness to the trend. So again, 3 months late, it'll be discussed, why, and then, but if there's a trend that's set, it will be looked at and discussed and then brought into the bookkeeping support by CWA if it needs to be. But there's always that opt-in option that you have. So the way to request the assistance of CWA for opting in is it's just transitioned, and between the local section and CWA staff, you make a notice that you'd like to opt into the program, and then staff will discuss on what needs to be handed over, turned over to the staff. And then there's no BOD or ops approval required. So there's no board or the operations committee that would have to require or need approval to require this. So it's really just between your local section and how you want to handle, and then CWA staff. So approvals there. We do ask, and we kind of stay strong to it, is if you do turn it over to CWA bookkeeping, that you need to stay with the system for 2 years for that support. So, you need to look at it and see, we need to turn it over, but, you have to give CWA a chance to work with you and the bookkeeping support group to keep it in hand. And, we don't want to turn it over for a month and then, 2 months later you want it back. There is a time requirement that we have. And then again, talking about the local section board majority decision of, is it time to give it back? So we look at the local down on the bottom, local section opting out request. The ops approves that or rejects it. And then the local section could appeal to the executive committee if they feel they want it back, and they did not get the approval from the ops committee. So, making sure things are done in a timely fashion. We talked about that, and you can see by the audit report that there is some lag time that needs to be picked up on, getting paperwork turned in, having the proper documents completed, not waiting for checks to be deposited or cashed, but so taking longer to catch up than to keep up. So, we want to make sure that the local sections are taking care of their finances, and the CWA support is there to help out. The reason to keep on time and make sure it's taken, because the late reports have impacts on lost documents. You have your event, you set the documents aside, you say, I'll take care of that next week. Time goes by, they get lost, they get misplaced. Increases volunteer and staff time. So, things change with the volunteers as well as staff. And then we have 10 to 12 people on the ops committee call that take a look at this for the reports. Staff and volunteer follow-up communications. There's a lot of communication that goes back and forth. This plays a big part in CWA for the local sections of finances. And then liaison involvement. I'm not sure if we really hit on that much today, but every local section has a liaison. They should be reaching out to you and sharing information, what's going on with CWA, finding out the status of how the local section is doing. And then there's CWA board involvement. The board plays a big part in the local sections. And so, if you need to talk to somebody, if the treasurer, president needs to talk to somebody, they're there to help you out. And then, of course, it can impact the audit. Renew and both William shared that about the results from the last audit we had. Okay. So here's who can help, right? William is the current treasurer. I'm the incoming treasurer. And then right behind me is Mark Takamoto, who will be the incoming treasurer next year. We have Chris Consento, I believe, who's the staff accountant for CWA. And then, as I mentioned a moment ago, you have your liaison. That's, the president chooses liaisons for the local sections. Are there any questions on this part or any of the others that you've might have come up or thought of while we've been going through this?
There is one question that came up. Is there a fee for having CWEA do the bookkeeping?
I'm going to lean on Renew. She's shaking her head no, and I'm going to say no. I've never heard a fee for CWA support in doing this. The CWA understands everybody's a volunteer. Everybody has another job to do, and CWA's staff is here to help any way they can to make things easier for everybody. Oh, I'm seeing a message from Mark that Brian Viacota is actually going to be following me. When I become treasurer, he'll be the incoming treasurer.
We'll make that correction.
Any other questions? You can type them into the Q&A box or raise your hand and we can unmute your microphone.
Well, while we wait for questions, if there is any, I'd like to note that the template for the budget, since the budget is the next thing really due from the treasurer of any significance, is by April 30th. Depending on your size, it may be very simple or a bit more complicated. So in coming up with the numbers, I like to volunteer. SARBS is one of the larger sections and does quite a few events as far as training events. We do 4 to 6 a year before COVID. Study sessions, we did 4 a year, and annual banquet, of course. And we have a breakdown where you have multiple training events. We created a copy of the template to break down all the training events where you can actually budget or track each one independently, and then it adds up in the spreadsheet to fill out your form, that the main budget document that you have to submit April 30th. So if you'd like some assistance where you could have a spreadsheet, a template where you can input multiple events and have a budget for each one of those, be glad to help with that by providing you a sample of that spreadsheet if you would like to have that.
Okay, I don't see any other questions coming in. So thank you for attending our orientation. This webinar, like we mentioned, is being recorded. It will be posted on our YouTube page, and you will also be able to access it on our leaders.cwea.org. That's just a quick way to get to that leader resources page that William was talking about earlier in the webinar, leaders.cwea.org. Thank you and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for attending.